Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to one of the most requested videos on my channel, which is the Bebop Beginner's Guide. Today we're gonna tell you everything you need to know about how to play Bebop from the laning stage to the mid game, to the end game, the different combos and the different builds. It's all gonna be happening here. I have a bunch of Bebop builds in game, so if you wanna try any of them, all you have to do is open the store and then search for AverageJonas, and you see you have a plethora of options you wanna try. So let's get right in and just explain the basics of the abilities. He has a hook. This hook is very annoying for the enemies and very fun for you. And when it's upgraded, it gets more range and less cooldown. And if you play a gun bop, it also adds some gun damage to hooked enemies for 10 seconds. I'll show you what this looks like this. And then you have a bomb. This bomb is very interesting because every time it deals damage to an enemy hero, it increases the damage by 2.5% permanently. And this is something I like to abuse, so that's why Bomb Bebop is my personal favorite. And then finally, we have the uppercut. Now, there are a lot of details in these different level ups. You can see that, for instance, if you play a gun bop, then uppercut has a lot of efficient ways of dealing more damage to your target. And it even has a cooldown reset if you max it out. So when it's maxed out, you can essentially hook someone, uppercut, your hook gets reset, and you can hook him back again. Another thing to notice is that his ult is called Hyper Beam. It's a very strong ult that has one of the highest spirit scaling damage in the game. You see it has 3 times damage per second per spirit, and it deals damage not only to the beam, but also in an AoE around you. So when you're ulting like this, you notice that there is a purple circle on the floor, which means that if you're in a tight space, sometimes popping Hyper Beam can be a surprising way of killing your enemies, especially when it's leveled all the way up, because then it also gives you 100% lifesteal on any heroes that are hit. It's also a very efficient tool for farming tier 3 camps super early, which you'll see in some of the builds, which is why you buy Infuser super early on those builds. What you guys probably want to know is what are the most efficient combos to do with Bebop. So, one thing that is pretty interesting is that when you hook someone, you can actually turn around. Because if you just hook like this, they will land in front of you. If you do a slow turn, they can land in front of you if timed correctly. And the reason why this is good is because in the laning stage, what you ideally want to do is hook them, turn around, and then uppercut them into the tower. So in most cases, your combo will basically be a hook into an uppercut, and then you can place a bomb on them while they're about to be uppercut, because they can't move while they're flying from the uppercut. And one more thing to notice is that the uppercut has lineup potential, meaning that if you just aim straight an uppercut, he goes not so high. But if you aim upwards like this, he flies up in the air. And this is something that's very important when you want to decide where you want to position your target when you're hooking. For instance, if you're in a tower, you just want to knock them straight up in the air next to your guardian, because that's how you're going to deal the most damage to them, and they can't get away before they land. So that's something to have in mind. It's also helpful if you have a teammate that is waiting somewhere around a corner. You can hook them and turn around and do this. So I would highly suggest just practicing this in the sandbox, because if you turn too fast, they're just going to end up behind you like this because they crash into your back. And that is because the hooked target follows the trajectory of the tip of your hook, meaning that if you're turned 90 degrees to the side, their trajectory will move slightly more to the right. And then essentially you want to follow the target all the way till they get around. There you go, see that? So I followed the target around, and then I flicked around in the last second, and then suddenly they ended in front of you. And this is a huge deal because it makes it much easier to hit the uppercut. If you want to test my builds, there are a bunch of guides you can find in-game by searching for AverageJonas, and you can try all of these different ones. You can see this one is currently the most popular one, and it's the one I play the most as well. It's not necessarily the best build, but it's the one I have the most fun with. So some people will say that hybrid or maybe even gun bop is better, but honestly, try for yourself and see what you enjoy the most, because at the end of the day, video games are meant to be fun. And second of all, I think this type of build gives you less aim requirements and more positioning and movement mechanics. Okay, so here we are. We are starting out in a game. And I'm currently playing the Bomb Bebop build, which means that my main focus is to build up as many stacks as possible by dealing hero damage to the enemy. So you'll notice here that the first thing I'm doing is actually I'm jumping off the zip, and I'm going for a cheeky jump pad beginning, and that's because I leveled my bomb first. But before you have a hook, it's really hard to actually get a bomb on someone. So there we put a bomb on him, do some damage to him, and we actually managed to get the first blood 10 seconds into the round. You gotta be careful with this, obviously, and try to also not lose any farm, but I highly suggest to try this for yourself. Try to be cheeky with the angles you come from and try to build those stacks. Now you can see we already have 2 stacks. It doesn't show decimals, so this is technically 2.5%. So every time you damage a hero, this one's gonna go upwards. So right now, the only thing we're focusing on is basically controlling the lane by last hitting and denying, and also looking for bomb stacks. So when you play Bomb Bebop, you try to be more aggressive than other builds, as you can see here, simply because how many stacks you build in the early game matters a lot. Another thing I'd like to say is that when you play specifically Bomb Bebop, you usually go hook bomb, which means that you don't have an uppercut. So learning to chain in either a heavy or a light melee, depending on the situation, to deal some extra damage after you put a bomb on them helps a lot. But either way, right now we're still just focusing on last hits, try to deny. When you play Bebop, remember to always aim down sights, because his gun has a charge-up time. But when you ADS, that charge-up time is already cast, meaning that it instantly fires the laser beam whenever you're trying to last hit. So that changes him from one of the worst last hitters to one of the best last hitters. If you were playing Gun Bop here, you probably would play slightly more passive and just focus on getting your farm up, because your timing isn't necessarily early game. But because we are bomb enjoyers here, we constantly want to fight, we constantly want to build stacks on them, because that makes the end game a lot easier. See, once again, I hook him in, notice how I turn around, and then heavy melee him. And because I turned around, not only did he take more damage from the tower, I also managed to get a heavy melee in, even though he charged back out, and he dies. So for the bomb build, you'll notice that one of the first items I built is Spirit Strike. This build, by the way, you can find it in-game by searching for AverageJonas. It will be the most favorited one. And the reason why I get Spirit Strike first is because not only does it give regen and melee damage, it gives you a big Spirit Shield, which is very helpful when you're doing early fights. And last but not least, it means that whenever you punch them, they take extra spirit damage and have 12% more spirit damage taken. So this is an extremely strong item that might get nerfed in the future. I think it's a little bit too strong. But either way, we're currently dominating the laning stage right now. Of course, this doesn't always happen, but it's really fun when it does. And you'll notice that the key element here is that knowing when to be aggressive and knowing when to farm. So you'll notice that, for instance, now my hook is on cooldown. So I put a bomb on my creep and I uppercut it into him. Clue there is to time it, so you wait until the bomb is almost about to go off, and then you uppercut it so they don't have time to dash away from it. One thing to have in mind when you're early laning stage in Deadlock is how little souls you actually get from hero kills. That is why you should never go for hero kills at the cost of farm. You'll notice how we currently have 2.9k and 2.8k souls. So we've managed to have a controlled aggression without sacrificing our farm. So this is basically how the early game goes, and then as soon as we hit 7 minutes, you'll notice how most of the jungle camps will spawn. And because this is a pretty greedy build, because the whole idea behind this build is to buy an echo shard so you can reset the cooldown of your bomb. So what this does, it makes you cast 2 bombs at once, meaning you'll do more damage, but also you'll build up bomb stacks twice as fast. So you'll notice I keep playing aggressive here. Look how I aimed up for the uppercut there to make him spend more time in the air. And I'm just lasering here. The reason why I ulted there, by the way, was because Shiv cannot go through my laser. So even though my laser wasn't necessarily killing him that much there, you could notice how he couldn't pass. So I was basically just like stopping him from going through the laser, meaning that my teammates could catch up. So early game, that's usually one of the uses for your hyper beam, other than the fact that you always should be wary of the tier 3 camps around the map. But because they spawn at 7 minutes, you still have time for this ability to come back on cooldown before you're gonna go for the tier 3 camps. So far this is a very clean early game. We've built up 20% extra damage on the bomb already. I will say that when you kill their guardian this early, it also makes it harder to build bomb stacks because the laning stage is kind of over. So that's also something to think about, that sometimes it might even be more beneficial to just keep fighting in the lane to build more stacks. But either way, as soon as you're reaching close to 7 minutes, you should really try to push the lane ups so you can start stealing their creep camps. Because once you hit 7 minutes, everybody starts fighting over the jungle camps. And the more you push the lanes up right before that 7-minute mark, the more you can steal the enemy camps while they're pushing their lane back. And this is a way of gaining a souls advantage, which is why you should always try to take space on the map and farm their side first, because it requires them to take a lot of risks to farm your side. So as long as you're the one who's constantly pushing, you're also the one who has the most map control. Okay, they're starting to get pretty aggressive here. Also, one thing I'll have to say about the bomb build is that I buy a lot of very tanky early game items, and that is specifically because I'm trying to get a Echo Shard. And because the Echo Shard is so expensive, it is 6,300 souls, you might be stuck with like a big pool of souls for a long time, and essentially you'll be weaker than your enemies who constantly buy tier 1 and tier 2 items. So that is why I buy as many tier 1 items as possible in the beginning. And this is something that would be very different if you played a different build. If you played an ult build, or if you played a gun build, you would probably start progressing onto tier 2 items at this point, but nonetheless, we are currently saving up for the big double bomb bomb. So now you'll see that the 7-minute mark has passed, and now we are in farm mode, because we still need 4,300 souls before we can activate our main combo. So notice how pretty soon, I mean, I could have done it sooner, but right now I'm going for the tier 3 camp, and notice what I'm doing. I'm just standing here in the middle of the camp, and the AoE damages all of them. What you also can do, if you want to, is you can spin around with your ult to break nearby boxes to get some of those buffs, because those buffs are permanent. So yeah, so in this stage of the game, you're not exceptionally strong, because right now you have a pool of 4,000 souls, which is half of your net worth right now, meaning that technically your strength right now is 4k. So that's something to have in mind, that taking fights is fine to build bomb stacks, but full committing when everyone else has spent all their souls might be risky. So just once in a while farming a little bit and looking for some hook plays, and that's kind of, yeah, you're kind of just like working on your timing. And again, if you play gun bop or ult bop, this would look different, because you would not save up that much souls, because that's not very beneficial this early. All right, now we have 6,700 souls. And also one thing I'd highly recommend in the early stages of the game is to try to run some urns, because not only does urns help you reach your Echo Shard timing faster, it also gives you an extra ability point. And the reason why this is important for Bebop is because he has two very important timings, and one of them is when your hook is maxed out, because now your cooldown on hook is very low. And the other one is the hyper beam, because once your hyper beam is maxed, you can clutch up a lot of situations. So right now this is a standard fight where we're just kind of fighting for urn control, and then somehow the urn got stuck here, and it took us a while before we could figure out how to pick it up. What we should have done here is probably make a viscous cube and then just stand on the cube to grab it. So now we finally have our Echo Shard, and we upgraded our speed boots too. So the reason why you get a lot of movement speed as early as possible as well is because you have to apply the bomb in melee range. So unless you land a hook, oh see, instantly going for the hook and 2 bombs. See how now I'm playing much more aggressive because I have my Echo Shard. And that's a very fine trade that we just did there. Their carry took a lot of damage, and I'm just like juggling him around to build bomb stacks. One thing that is also pretty important, especially when your hook is maxed out, is to try to not full commit, because it's so beneficial for you to go in, hook someone, put double bombs on them, uppercut them, try to maybe even uppercut them back into the enemy to build even more bomb stacks. Because if your bomb goes off in the middle of the enemies, you get stacks for each enemy that you hit. I know that this guide is supposed to be a generic guide for Bebop, but I think a lot of the stuff applies to the other builds too. So I feel like it's worth mentioning that these timings are very important. And like I said earlier, if you play gun bop, you would probably play this part a bit different. I am just a double bomb enjoyer, as probably some of you have noticed. And the build has been getting pretty popular because it's very fun to blow up the enemy. Now that we've reached the mid game, around 15 minutes, the challenge now is to balance farming and building bomb stacks. Because if you farm too much, you're very efficient with farming because you have 2 bombs. But if you farm too much, you fall behind on stacks. So you have to like try to learn a balance on this. And that balance is not easy to learn, and you'll probably have to play a lot of games where you're like, oh shit, I should have done this differently. And I highly recommend going back to your replays and checking how the different, like which fights should I have joined, which fights should I not have done. Try to be very like wary about your decision making in the game to make it easier for you. Because one thing I've noticed is like a lot of people come into my chat and then they go, hey, I'm not getting any stacks. Like what do I do? And then you have to like look at your macro play, like how often are you farming versus how often are you trying to build stacks. So because I now saw that there was a lot of action on the right side of the map, I actually snuck in and stole their Sinner's Sacrifice here. So try to look at your map a lot, because this is going to help your team overall get a higher net worth, because you're not only gaining farm, but you're also stealing enemy farm. So now, because I know that they have the urn, I am setting up for what I call a pretty evil play. So the idea here is that because you have to stand still on the urn spot, I'm going to try to hook him off before it's delivered and then kill him. And the clue here is to not be seen. You can also do some third person Fortnite peeking and whatnot, but you'll see here like Shiv is about to go for the capture. He doesn't see me, and then I'm now getting ready. I hook him off. I look upwards, put 2 bombs on him, and I instantly ult. And now, because I'm hyper beaming like this, he's just stuck down here. And then we steal the urn and we say thank you very much for giving us this giant package of souls. So urn control is extremely important, and Bebop is one of the best heroes to get urn control. So always try to have that in your mind, that if the enemy has the urn, try to set up a play around it. And this is where like calling information to your teammates is important. You have to tell them like, guys, I'm ready for a hook on the urn. And the reason why that is important is because he needs to feel like it's safe. Because if he notices that he sees a lot of enemies, he's never going to go for the urn, and then it just becomes like a stalemate where you're both waiting. So see, once again, when I miss a hook, I instantly try to go for the bomb uppercut combo on a creep, because if it lands on the enemy, it damages them and builds a stack. But we always try to go for the hook play first, because that's a more guaranteed kill. The reason why we're fighting very heavily for this walker here is because it unlocks a flex slot. So you'll notice how the enemies are already starting to group up around us too. Simply because this is a very important objective. Okay, let's see if... Oh, see, we just... Oh boy. Oh boy, that's a big save from Viscous, by the way. It's also kind of funny, if Viscous puts his square on you, your ult keeps channeling. That's something to have in mind. So yeah, maybe we got a little bit too aggressive there to destroy the walker. And that is something to constantly have in your mind, like, where is the enemy team? What are my chances of killing this walker to get that flex slot? And the further out in the game you are, the more important the flex slots are. And one thing to be wary of with Bebop, and that's something a lot of people have asked me too, is that they will win the laning stage, but then they will lose the game. So how do you keep up your steam? So you'll notice how I'm actually the highest net worth on my team right now, even though I'm not playing a hyper carry that hyper farms. And that's because I've found a perfect balance between fighting and building bomb stacks, but also doing objectives, especially the urn. So that's something to have in mind, because Hayes and Seven should be farming more than you, and they should have more net worth than you, because they are your late game carries. They are supposed to like hit the 35-minute mark and just destroy your enemies. And see, once again, we are going for the tier 3 camp, and I'm beaming them all down and also breaking the boxes nearby because you can get extra souls and extra loot. The Hyper Beam has a surprisingly short cooldown, so don't be scared to using it regularly. It's 70 seconds. And in this particular build, I skill the hook to max first, just because it doubles the amount of potential you have to hook someone in and build more stacks. Oh, here we go. Another hook on pocket. So see, this pocket is pretty good. What he did was, instead of just like sending his TP out and then using his suitcase, he TPs out and then uses his suitcase right as the timer of the bomb is about to explode. And this is where a lot of counterplay comes into the mix, where there are some heroes like Dynamo and Viscous and Pocket that you really hate playing against, and you have to play a lot smarter because they can either dispel your bomb or completely evade your bomb with different iframe abilities. Like Dynamo can use his TP out of it, and especially Dynamo and Viscous is annoying because they can also do it on their allies. With Pocket, it's not the biggest of deals because you can just try to put the bombs on someone else. But with Viscous, you basically need to try to juke out his cube, and same with Dynamo. And that's something that requires a lot of skill because you can put bombs on the cube after he's cubed. So basically what you want to do, you want to hook and uppercut him and then wait for him to cast cube and then just put the bombs on him while he's cubed because they're going to explode when the cube ends. And this is something that takes a lot of practice, and you need to like learn what situations it's easy to build bomb stacks in and not. And this is also why in some games, if you notice that you're playing a lot of counters against a lot of counters for this build, you might consider playing either an ult build or a gun build because you're gonna struggle to build up stacks. And the entire point of this build is to build up stacks. And once again, you can find all these builds in-game by searching up my name. And you can also come to my stream and ask questions if you want to know more about how to play them. So now we're 22 minutes in and the souls are very even. Being 10k ahead at 22 minutes isn't a huge deal. And we're playing as a team that has some pretty scary heroes late game. You have both Shiv, Infernus, and Abrams. And these guys are pretty tanky too, so they're not necessarily the easiest targets to blow up. So one issue you can notice we have now is that I have a lot of souls, but I don't have any more flex slots. So this is one of those situations where you have to talk to your team about like, okay, is there any way we can get more flex slots? Because if your net worth is pretty high, you might start to run out of slots, and that changes your item priority. So there are different timings in the game where you can sometimes fight a team that have like 20k souls more than you, but because they have less flex slots, those 20k souls don't necessarily represent the power level difference between the two teams because they just are not allowed to buy the items that they want to buy. So that is also why you constantly need to check the map. For instance, we'll notice now that they've taken our walker on pink, meaning that if they want another flex slot, they need to take these three. So defending them is of a very high importance. So basically both teams now have 2 flex slots. When I play Double Bomb Bebop, I sometimes get a little bit silly, and some may call it inting, because I'll essentially just go really deep just to build 2 stacks. And this looks like one of those situations. So look at, okay, so you may think, oh my god, he died, that was silly. But look at my stacks here, 65, right? Boom, 72. So I just built 7.5% stacks there because it hit multiple targets. I'm not saying that you should int like I did there because dying is not good, but at least it makes you feel slightly better if you hit multiple targets and build more stacks, because again, that increases your damage more. So that is one of the difference also between playing gun bop or ult bop, where you are constantly trying to not die to stay ahead, because dying gives you a severe net worth disadvantage because you're losing out on a lot of farm. And especially if you notice that there's a lot of unsecured souls. So that's this big sphere on your back that becomes bigger and bigger based on how many unsecured souls you get. And those unsecured souls are gotten from farming the jungle, and they slowly become secured over time. So if you have a lot of unsecured souls, you also should be extra weary. Anyway, here we have an attempt on a steal. Didn't go well, but we're trying to clean up nonetheless. So mid-boss is one of the biggest like pivotal moments in this game where stealing a mid-boss buff can be a huge value. It's extremely risky to do mid-boss, but oh god, here we go. See, now we're getting into that silly damage territory where we found an Infernus and we just blew him to smithereens. Now, because they had mid-boss buff, that means that they respawn much faster, so it's not that big of a deal. But sometimes I've noticed that when teams have the mid-boss buff, they kind of just int a little bit. They just run in and die, and then they're like, Oh, but it's fine. We got the mid-boss buff, so we'll be back in no time. But what you need to remember is that we still get souls from your kills. So even though you respawn fast, and that's a very funny voice line from Lash actually, where he says, oh, they got the reju. Great, now I get to kill them twice. But yeah, so you notice now I'm constantly playing very aggressive because I constantly want to build bomb stacks. And that definitely makes you die a lot more. But we just keep on trying to... We keep on trying to build those stacks. There's a bug, however, where sometimes your echo shard doesn't go off. And sometimes you hear the bomb sound, but it doesn't actually cast it, which is very annoying. But I assume that that is something they will fix. So we are still completely even here. 26 minutes in. And there's no sign of any team winning yet. So we're going to try to skip forward and see what happens. So now we're at the 30-minute mark. And you'll notice how... we've actually lost the lead now. We are actually 17k souls behind. Now, this isn't a massive deal this late, like percentage-wise. It's not that huge, but it's something to have in mind on what kind of fights you want to take. Usually it means that you want to try to single out a target and kill them before engaging in a big team fight. So because you're much more beneficial to fight a 6v5 than just like pushing a lane and straight up fighting 6v6. Another thing to be wary of is when the enemy buys Soul Rebirth, because they will come back to life. And this is something we've forgotten a lot. You killed someone, you're like, yeah, we killed them, and then they come back and then they destroy you. So just have that in the back of your mind that whenever you see the Soul Rebirth icon, it means that they will resurrect. And then it goes on cooldown, and this icon will only come back when their Soul Rebirth is ready again. It's on a 200-second cooldown, I believe. So yeah, right now we are 20k souls behind, and we're kind of just looking to we're trying to not overextend too much. We're kind of looking for fights. The urn is a pretty important one. See, we'll land a big hook here on Paradox. She TP's out, but because we've reached so many bomb stacks now, she actually gets disintegrated. And suddenly we are in a 6v5, but I'm beaming right there, and they're focusing me, and then Lash is jumping in. And he gets stunned, he gets the lifesteal off, he jumps off. He tosses Abrams back in and kills him. And this is a very beneficial trade for us, because look at the Souls lead. It's completely gone. And that's another thing to have in mind, is that the Souls swings so much this late, which is why the 20k lead isn't such a huge deal. And not only that, but because we won that fight, now we get a free earned delivery. Meaning that we also all get even more souls. So you look at the score up here now, and suddenly we're back in the lead. We just gained 30k souls in the span of a few minutes, and because they're all dead, they are not getting any. And the lead is going to keep going upwards, because while they are respawning, we are now busy trying to take map control, kill their walkers, and farm as much as possible. The later it gets, the more careful you need to be as Bebop. And the reason for that is because unless you buy items like Warpstone, which I usually buy this late because of Abrams and Infernus, they will try to jump you, and Warpstone is just a great item overall. This is the newest edition of my build. It's been working really well so far. You want to play in the backline consistently. You are not a frontliner. You do not rely on your weapon to damage them, for this build at least. And what you want to do is constantly look for hooks. You got a 10-second cooldown. You got a 1800 damage combo on your bomb. So see how I'm constantly looking for combos. And yeah, this is pretty scary because there's a giant Abrams on you, but we have Fleetfoot as well, so we're getting away. And he's dumb enough to keep chasing me. That's probably not the best idea, because now he's actually quite low. And he can't really re-engage. He used his ult as well. So yeah, late game, you have to remember what kind of hero you are playing. You are not a hyper carry. Unless you play Gun Bop, then maybe. But even as Gun Bop, your goal is to single out targets. Okay, here we singled out Infernus. And he just took 2000 damage from my bomb in the span of a second. Now, one thing I have to say is that there are some really important counters to this build. The most important one is debuff remover. The bomb counts as a debuff, meaning that if you buy this item, you can actually just remove the bomb straight up. So then what do you do? Well, there's a few things you can do, because some people, they will buy Ethereal Shift, for instance, to dodge your bombs. And the way you counter these two are very different. If they buy Ethereal Shift, you can get Curse, because Curse silences them and also silences their item usage. That's not going to work with Debuff Remover. And I know what you're going to say, this is also an item, yes. But because the Debuff Remover reduces the time any debuff is on you by 35%, it actually means that the curse duration will be shorter than the time it takes for the bombs to explode, because the curse is 3.25 seconds. But because they have Debuff Remover, it cleverly makes the curse last for a short amount of time, meaning that the curse will disappear before the bombs go off, and they have a half-second window to remove your bombs with Debuff Remover anyway. And that is a pretty significant thing to know about, because a lot of people just buy Curse because they're like, oh, it's going to counter items, it's great. But they forget that Curse is a debuff, and debuff resist will reduce the time of Curse. So then what do you do? So like I said, if most of them buy Ethereal Shift, you can curse them and they can't use it. If they buy Debuff Remover, we actually found a pretty clever way of countering it. A lot of people don't know this, but you can actually put bombs on yourself. But it does not work with the double tap self-cast. But if you change self-cast mode to modifier button, and I use mouse 5 for instance, you can actually hold down mouse 5, and then when you press your double bomb combo, which is bomb, echo shard, bomb, it casts it on yourself instead. Meaning that they can no longer remove it with Debuff Remover because it's not even on them. Then all you have to do is either get Majestic Leap to launch yourself high in the air and land on them and explode, or you can buy Warp Stone, which I'm currently using, that teleports your head, or one of my personal favorite, the Phantom Strike. And the reason why Phantom Strike is great, not only does it teleport you to an enemy target, it also slows and disarms them, so you're more guaranteed to get the damage off. It also does spirit damage. And the reason why this is significant is because that means that your Mystic Vulnerability debuff is already applied to them before the bombs go off. Because you don't want your bombs to be the ones who apply Mystic Vulnerability. You want that to already be applied. And if you're really good, you'll also simply do a punch, and then you'll have another 12% spirit resist. But it's very important that you don't uppercut, because you might toss them out of the bomb range. So my personal favorite combo is simply put 2 bombs on yourself, Phantom Strike in, and then a light melee just to apply this debuff, and then you'll just explode in their face, and they will be very surprised why they got killed instantly, because it's so easy to counter Bebop. Everybody could do it. So yeah, just food for thought, because a lot of you have been asking those questions where like, well, this build is useless because they just buy Debuff Remover. And I'm just, that's where you have to be one step ahead. So if you see that people are starting to buy Debuff Reducer, which later upgrades to Debuff Remover, you should have this in the back of your mind, because it costs a lot of souls. So try to plan ahead and try to constantly check your enemy's items before you decide which path you want to take. I hope this helps. I also want to address, I made a video about a one-button Bebop with like super keybinds and stuff. I might make a video on how to do quick casting keybinds and multi-button keybinds later, but I also want to tell you I do not use it regularly. It's something I did for the video and I do once in a while for fun. I don't think that's the way the game is intended to be played, so it's not something I regularly do. I do take pride in clicking all the combos in the correct order, and I think you should do it too. However, if you want to try the one-button Bebop, there is a video on it already on my channel, and I might make a video explaining how to set all your items to quick cast so you don't have to click the confirmation key afterwards, because I believe that is a feature that probably will be added into the game at a later state. Anyway, let's go back to the game, and now we have a 15k lead, but none of the bases have been invaded at all. It looks like there's not much action happening right now. When you get to the late game, it starts to get scary because your respawn timers are much longer. So one thing you'll probably notice is that people play much safer because they know that as soon as one of you gets picked off, they can either go for the mid boss, or they can just try the end, or just take a very favorable team fight for them. So right now we're all just running around doing objectives, and I'm slowly trying to look for a pick. So I'm trying to just go for a hook here. By the way, highly recommend this area here is great for hooks because it's a very small crevice here that a lot of people peek down this long line. So when you're on these stairs here on the left, trying to go for a hook in a straight line there very often hits targets even though you don't necessarily see them, but you kind of just cast it and hope that someone shows up. So sometimes because the hook is such a short cooldown late game and one pick can be the difference between winning and losing the game, sometimes you just want to toss your hook out in a position that has a fairly high chance of getting someone, and they might just get lucky. Okay, here comes Abrams. I hook him mid-air to cancel his jump. Oh, and I instantly blow up. I went for a hook there, and because they had the zip line quite far up, we just instantly got punished, and suddenly this is looking pretty bad because now they killed 2 of us and they could be looking to do mid-boss here, which I think might just happen. Yeah. So now they're going for mid-boss, and when you're doing mid-boss, there's a lot of things to think about. First of all, Bebop is a fairly good hero at winning the crystal punch. Because for those who don't know, the crystal buff from this boss is not who kills him first, but it's who lands a heavy punch at the crystal first. So there's a few ways of doing this. One of them, which is a pretty cheeky one, is to stand outside the mid-boss pit, try to hook one of them, put 2 bombs on them, and then uppercut them back into the pit in hopes of like hitting a lot of them. This isn't that easy to do and not very likely. So I do recommend a different approach, which I've started doing a lot, which is putting 2 bombs on yourself and then dropping down in the middle. And one thing that is important here is that if you double tap crouch, you dash downwards. So that increases your momentum and because you want to land as quickly as possible. And essentially what you want to do is either parry to try to stop them from punching the crystal, or uppercut people away from the crystal so someone else can punch it. I think that like there's a lot of skill involved in when to do mid-boss and how to punch the crystal and getting the timing right and stuff. But there also is some luck to it because like you'll get hit by a random stun, you're gonna die, and suddenly the game looks very scary. But either way, we are still up 13k souls here, but it doesn't look great because right now they're getting mid-boss for free because we kind of overextended. And then Hayes went in and tried to steal it, and that did not go well. And suddenly we're not in a very favorable position. And at this point you can say, well, this looks a lot like you're about to lose. So then how do we turn this around? I'm ziplining all the way down here. This is a pretty risky play. But I'm trying either way to get a bomb off on... Oh, Abrams is 1. Wait, sorry, I misunderstood this. I thought they already had taken the mid-boss, but they did not, so that's why we're speeding in to try to still capture it. I have 400 health here, not looking great for me, and I die. And they get the mid-boss buff. So the mid-boss buff makes them respawn really fast, and we're not in a great situation right now. And you can see also the souls lead is basically caught up. Suddenly it's 245 versus 240. At this stage of the game, when the enemy has the rejuve buff, you do not want to play aggressive, because even if you get a trade with the enemy where you like get 1 kill and then you die, that is beneficial for the enemy because they will respawn faster. Meaning that because the rejuve buff has a timer, you basically just want to let it run out while playing defensively. We do, however, have a crazy Yamato here with 51k souls, and she's currently doing God's work, I think. And the good way of fighting like this is that we're just stalling. So even though these fights are not ideal, at least they're just fighting instead of pushing the base. Infernus cast an ult, not much else happening. And now we're back to the kind of stalemate where the pressure is now on blue team to make a play because we have 1 dead and they still have 2 players with the rejuve buffs. And once again, we are Bebop. We are not a frontline fighter. We still just want to stay in the back and try to get hooks out. It seems like they're starting to go for a play here. I blink in to try to get a bomb on Paradox, but as you probably will notice from your games too, Paradox is not fun to play against. So once again, we lose another fight. We lose 4 players, and the souls lead is now completely even once again, and they're starting to push our base. And this is like the very late game. And one thing to have in mind when you're this late, I know the late game can be very scary and confusing for you guys because there's suddenly so many things and so many items. And I think sometimes you gotta like slow the pace down and then just try to look at what items the enemies have. Press tab and then look. And the reason why this is extra important on Bebop is how many of them have bought counters to your build. So let's see. Okay, Paradox does not have anything that counters my bombs. Neither does Vindicta. Neither does Abrams, but he has got 3,000 health and spirit armor, so he's not gonna die. Infernus has also not bought any counters. Neither has Shiv. And Pocket is a counter by itself, but he also bought an Ethereal Shift. Now, I will say in most games, if you're having a pop-off game, I think more people would buy counters. But because I am having a fairly good game, I guess. But I think they still feel like because Ziptie here has 52k souls, that he is a bigger issue to deal with, as well as a late game 7 and Haze. And that's where maybe that's a misplay from their side, where like they don't respect the bomb damage enough, because right now each bomb does 1,000 damage in an AoE. So anyway, let's see what happens next. All right, so right now we lost another 2 heroes. And it's not looking great for us. We only have the patron left. I'm landing a pretty big ult here, killing Paradox, but she already came back alive due to her soul rebirth. And this is where a lot of enemies actually kind of throw, because they feel like the game is over. So right now we have 3 people alive, and then Haze pops off an ult here. She kills 1, and it seems like they're already scared to finish, because it is a very snowballing game. See, we just killed Vindicta as well, and suddenly they can no longer push even though they're in the souls lead. And once our 2 teammates here are up now, you constantly have to check how long does it take before these guys to respawn. Okay, 50 and 40 seconds. Right now, we have a very favorable situation to fight. And this is a mistake from Infernus, where he's like, oh, we're in the lead, we pushed their base, so I'm just gonna like be a little bit cocky about it. That is a big misplay for him, because now he's got a staggered respawn. So now we're suddenly looking at a 6 versus 3, as long as we do something within the next 20 seconds. And this is where we should not be farming. This is where we should definitely try to push our lanes back out, because we have only the patron left. And we should really look to make a play, because now that they have staggered respawns, they are scared. So you'll see how like I'm already pretty far pushed up here, because my hook is one of the best ways of making these plays. And we're looking to get the final walker for a flex slot. We get a hook here on Shiv. And now they're kind of throwing a little bit. We were landing a massive hyper beam here. And suddenly the game is turned around. Because in the late game, you have to remember that the spawn timers are so long that being at the wrong place at the wrong time just once can turn a game around even with a 20k souls lead. So let's see if we also throw now. So we finally got our walker flex slots. We're looking at pushing. I'm looking for hooks. And we're not full committing, because it's very favorable for the enemy team to be inside the base, because they have a lot of high ground plus towers. And then Paradox goes for a super risky swap here. There's an Abrams bullying me. I'm taking a lot of damage, but because I warp stone, I blink away. And once again, they get overzealous. And you'll see that that's what it looks like to have soul rebirth. Did you see how he turned green there for a little bit? And he comes back. And this time we were weary about it. And suddenly these guys have actually thrown quite the lead. They were in our base. They had the mid-boss buff. But this is an example of how quickly the tides can turn in this game, especially late, because of how long the respawn timers are. And instead of fully resetting, they just keep bleeding numbers. They have now had 1 teammate dead for the last few minutes. Also, by the way, if Paradox swaps you while you're ulting, your beam stays on her the entire time because you aim at each other. So if you're a Paradox, do not swap a Bebop that has spirit power. And then we put, I think I put bombs on the patron here because it actually does damage to the patron. See that? I just put I just put bombs on the patron because the patron takes full spirit damage, and suddenly we win the game. I hope this was very helpful for you guys. I know it's a little bit different type of guide format than a lot of channels do. I like to kind of do the VOD review format a little bit more because I feel like you guys get a visual clue of what's going on and then explain the focus behind it. If you guys want to learn more about Bebop, I stream every day on Twitch and I play Bebop most of the time. And if you guys have any feedback to how this video was, I would love to hear it. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video. I am going to try to get a Gray Talon guide out as soon as possible as well. And I hope you guys appreciate these videos, even though they're kind of less scripted, but it's more about a constant flow of knowledge and information based on what I'm seeing. I feel like that works better for me, and I hope that this works well for you too. I hope you guys learned something today, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more daily videos. We have daily guides on the main channel every day, and we have daily VODs on the second channel every day. And I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye. Don't forget to subscribe. Subscribe.